So I'm actually sitting right now in Pine Island. I am on the side of the highway. So as you can hear, I apologize for all the noise. There's quite a lot of traffic for a country road if you think about it. But this area right now is just beginning its growing season for the year. And their primary crop is onions and garlic. And one of the reasons for that is that back in the 1800s, this whole area used to be basically swampland. There was like one area of Pine Island that actually used to stick up out of the swampy waters and the flood waters that came from the Wallkill River, and it was a lot of pine trees, so like that's kind of how it got its name. However, what really makes this place so unique is it's slightly higher in elevation than a lot of the surrounding areas, and there's this amazingly rich black soil, which you can see behind me. Now, the reason why they have all of the black soil is because this was a deposit for glaciers. So basically, they call it like the muck. Over thousands of years, they had glaciers that stretch across the continent during the Ice Age. And when they started to melt and recede, they left all of the different sediments and sludge and mud and rock and everything that was inside of them at the bottom, and that's what turned into this, this black dirt. Now, what's really interesting about it is that it's got a huge amount of sulfur in it, which is perfect for growing garlic and onions. I don't know exactly why biologically, but that's what they thrive on. Now, the other thing that's really cool is this place is known for its fossils. And not just any fossils, but mastodons. So basically, the giant elephants that were covered with hair, the woolly mammoths, they've actually recovered the remains of those animals here, because this is similar to like a peat bog before it was drained. And the reason they drained it was the farmers who were here in the 1800s, they actually were constantly in dispute with a local mill owner who had a high price for opening up the dams to let some of the floodwaters recede from the Wallkill River. And they were fed up with it. So what they started doing is they started digging these networks of ditches to drain the land and not have to rely on the help of a mill owner. Now, I think they called it the Muskrat Beaver War. I'm not exactly sure which side was I'm assuming the beavers were the dam builders and the muskrats were the ones who were trying to get rid of them. But, over time, through a lot of legal struggle, they finally got it passed so that, they were allowed to clear this land, drain the water out of it through all these ditches, and eventually turn it into farming land. Majority of the immigrants were Polish and German, and there's still a huge amount of Polish heritage in this area. Like Jimmy Sturr, he's the famous musician, the polka musician. He actually lives in Florida and New York, which is about 5-10 minutes from here. And what you wouldn't expect is that this is right, only a couple miles away from two very large towns, Middletown and Warwick, New York. Both of them are, financial and economic hubs in the Hudson Valley and in Orange County in particular. Now, what's really cool about all of this soil is these farmers here, they plant, as I said, mainly onions and garlic. However, it's not an easy thing to do. Once the crop gets going, we're fine. Just like any crop, though, when it first starts to sprout and come out of the dirt, it's very fragile. They actually have to use cover crops, which is a lot of what you see behind me right now, to protect it from the sunlight, from the elements. And, because it is so flat and open here, it's basically a wind tunnel also. And that can be very difficult during the beginning part of spring when first you're contending with frost, with snow, and then flooding. And then on top of that, you're also having to deal with the issue of, the sunlight just beating down on it. So those cover crops really help. And once the plants begin to mature enough, they actually will pull up those cover crops. I don't know if it's alfalfa or what exactly a plant is. And sorry, I think I think the Knight Rider just got away from us. Regardless, that was a pretty damn cool car. I couldn't even see what it was. It was just black and loud. But anyways, a lot of the groceries that you buy at your supermarket, they come from places like this. But what we don't know is that these guys don't get the help that bigger companies do. Now, when I say bigger companies, I mean the ones who are providing the seeds for genetically modified corn, soy, wheat, and any of the other GMO crops that have basically taken over the market in the United States, which, there hasn't been enough research yet to see if there's any harmful effects. However, we have seen a rise in, gluten allergies. We've seen a rise in endocrine problems. Children are actually developing, they're hitting puberty earlier than they did in the past. And what that's doing is, it's changing the way that we're growing. And people aren't really sure why it's happening, but it's probably, it's a safe assumption that it has something to do with the food and chemicals that we put into our body on a daily basis. Now, I'm not saying that's the only thing, but these guys here, because they're not growing those giant crops that the government wants to subsidize, though, they get very little help. And when there is, a crop failure due to a frost or a wind, like a few years ago, they had first they had a late frost, and then the windstorm, and then a sand from the wind basically tore everything up. And, they lost a huge amount of their crops in this area, and several of the farmers closed their farms. And, these are generational farms. These have been around since the 1800s. One man in particular, who owns Pavelski Farms, he's also a lobbyist to Washington, D.C., trying to get rights for the farmers here to be able to get the same kind of help and assistance that corn, wheat, and soy farmers would normally get. Now, I'm not saying that, corn, wheat, and soy farmers are evil or anything like that, but it's just the way that the government reimburses people when there's insurance things or natural disasters. These guys have to struggle a lot harder because they don't have that. That being said, this is a thriving community. It has a huge amount of produce that gets put out. When you go to the supermarket, you don't really think always where it comes from. It's like, this may be from Chile, this may be from New York, this may be from California. But this is one of those fertile areas that, if you take a handful of this soil, it is black to the point of my wristwatch. Like, you can't get much blacker than that. So if you're in the area, the other thing to keep in mind is it's absolutely gorgeous here. Like, let me just turn the camera around so you can see. But, you just have these wide, flat expanses. Greenhouses. And the sunsets down here are absolutely spectacular. It's just a beautiful place to be. So if you can visit it, I would. As I said, this is like right in the heart of Orange County. It's maybe 15 minutes outside of Middletown and about maybe 10 minutes from Goshen. So you're like right in between three major towns. As I was saying before, there are ditches that were dug. Like, these are basically examples of the kind of ditches that help to irrigate this land and drain it also when it got flooded. Now, this field is being left fallow right now because it's probably being used last year, so they're giving it a chance to have a break, and then they alternate from patch to patch. But as I said, this is black dirt. You can't get much blacker than that, and it just smells alive. It's beautiful. Even that little piece there. Let's see. It just wants to grow. It wants to give. It wants to give you food and help us to grow in this area. So do what you can to support local. If you're a member of the Hudson Valley, there is every year multiple food festivals, and one that I have not been able to go to yet, but I've been dying to go to